Good afternoon, everyone. Test, test. Can y'all hear me? Mic's on? All right. First of all, thank you all. We know there's lots of things happening today and appreciate everyone joining us here in Group Black's Excellence Lounge. And we appreciate you spending some time to speak with us. I'm excited for this conversation we're about to have with the incomparable Monique Nelson, a dear friend of mine and also an expert in the space. We're going to be talking about streaming, and we're going to be talking about the new majority consumer, where they are, and how brands need to understand fundamentally how their behaviors, how their media consumption patterns are changing. I'm hearing a little echo, right? Are we all hearing that? A little feedback. All right, let's bring it down low. Sorry, guys, a little technical. How's this? Is that better? All right, perfect. We're going to be discussing and just talking about what's happening with this consumer. Fundamentally, brands need to grow, they need to increase market share, and if they're not understanding how the consumer behavior is changing, and not just sort of where to find them, but how to resonate with them, you're not going to see the same ROI being driven as was in the past. And so excited to have Monique with me. Monique is the chair and co-founder, or chair of, or an owner of UniWorld Group.
I would never take that away from Byron.
Can never take that away from Byron. That is true. UniWorld is one of the longest, if not the longest, multicultural agencies in the industry. I'm not going to go through her entire bio. That would take the full 45 minutes because she has done such amazing work. But UniWorld is a full-service agency. And as it moves forward and continues to evolve, you're now branching into NIL as a huge area, and data with Culture Labs. And I'd love for you to touch on that as we go through this. Sure. What I will highlight is just some of the work that she does beyond the day-to-day. She sits on the board of trustees for Brandeis University. She's the Advertising Week Global Board, the Adweek Diversity and Inclusion Council. And coming up next week, you are one of the founders and the founding member of Black Week, which we're excited about next week.
Yes, excited to see all of you there.
Awesome. So before I jump into all the amazing questions that I have here, one thing I wanted to touch on, the reason this is called the Excellence Lounge is because we recognize that the consumer, the African-American consumer, is changing in their behavioral pattern, and they are over-indexing in streaming. Yet today, when you look at the streaming space, there isn't a place where AA and multicultural consumers can go and find all the content that has the inclusive storytelling that they need. And so we are excited about our partnership with NBC and Peacock, that if you now go inside of Peacock, you will see the Excellence Collection, which is a partnership between Group Black and Excellence, where you will find the best content for the multicultural consumer, the most inclusive content for the multicultural consumer now in streaming. And it's an opportunity for brands to have an easy button to reach that consumer that over-indexes. By the way, the data shows that when consumers see themselves in the content, their conversion rate goes up anywhere from, I think it's like 17 to 30%. So it is a really huge opportunity for brands to be there. And as agencies, agents of brands, a lot of the work that your agency is doing is helping to educate brands on where they need to be so they're not missing out on their consumers. So let's start there, Monique. Can you talk to me a little bit about the work you're doing at UniWorld as a leader in educating brands on this consumer? You all are the premier experts on this consumer from an agency perspective. So talk to me about what questions that brands are asking and how you are educating them.
Sure, thank you. And thank you so much for having me, Cavel and Group Black. I love the setup. Great to see everyone. One of the things that we continue to talk about is that this evolving consumer is continuing to over-consume, right? The Black consumer is continuing to over-index in media consumption. The trick is it's not in one place, right? They are looking for themselves, they are creating for themselves, they are pulling it together for themselves. So at this point, why aren't we meeting them where they are, right? So that's the first thing. Second, 18 plus spend more than 17% more time consuming media than others. So again, what are we doing, right? The numbers don't lie. Connected TV, 39% of total time spent consuming media on connected TV, both a challenge and an opportunity for brands, right? We understand that that can be a different type of engaging space, but we can't ignore it. Again, how do we bring that into the mix? There's too much content, and then there's not enough, all at the same time. The proliferation of content and access to it is really a difficult landscape. Hence, why it's so important to have excellence, right? It's really important to figure out we need probably 10 more of these, right? Because we still don't have enough places to put the money that is actually really deserved of these communities, right? We don't have enough places to put it, and we need to start that cycle of reciprocation with the creator economy so that we can start to meet the needs of these communities with the content that's actually important to them as they are creating as well. I love what we started here. I can't wait to see the original content come to play, because it's one thing to have archival content, it's one thing to have repurposed content, but boy, when this thing explodes with the content that is for the people, by the people, that's when this will really take off.
And we hear it too, because now that we have a platform in partnership with NBC, I was blown away by the number of producers, content creators, writers who have struggled to get content that we see like, oh, this is amazing, this resonates, there's a cultural relevancy here, but yet they struggle to get it onto some of the major streamers, which is where the scale is, right, in the content, these scales, and that was one of the impetus. You quoted some amazing stats, which I have to steal from you, by the way. I'm going to put that in our excellence deck. You also, I'm assuming some of that comes from your investment in Culture Labs, which you talked about in the introduction. You, as an agency, decided that not just were you going to provide services, but you were going to provide insights.
Absolutely.
So can you talk a little bit about Culture Labs and how you're leveraging the investment you've made in data to translate that for brands and where they need to meet the consumers?
Absolutely.
And what trends, if you can share any that, and you just shared some great ones, but are there other trends there that you see coming out of the work you're doing?
Absolutely. I mean, Culture Labs has been something that we've been incubating inside UWG for probably 15 years. But one of the questions and barriers that we saw when we were talking to clients was they would say, well, where's the data, right? Because again, the data that was out there was so broad, but yet not applicable in a way that could really say, no, this is where they're different, this is where they're the same, and these are the ways that you should reach them based on these similarities and differences. So it was very hard for us to deliver a business case based on what we think. We really needed to figure out what we know, right? What do we know to be true? So we embarked on this probably 7 years ago, just started building what we call UIN, which is our Unicultural Intelligence Network, which really does focus primarily on people of color, as well as intersectionality, so women, LGBTQ+, and really talk about the nuances, right? Black Americans, but what kind, right? Are you of African descent? Are you of Caribbean descent? Are you of the South? Right? Regionality matters. So we really did start to build a database that we knew would be inclusive and important to dimensionalize that for our clients and allow them to have more access, and then ultimately have the backup to go in and fight for those dollars, right? To be able to say, oh no, this is why that matters. Ford Motor Company, we were able to uncover the fact that Black Americans have a longer cycle in buying than their white counterparts. 60 days for whites, 90 to 120 for Blacks. Big difference when you start talking about a retail strategy against those audiences, where you would stop talking to white people after 60 days. You can't stop talking to white people after 60 days if you'd like them to buy your car. So those are the types of things that we're utilizing. We want to make sure that our clients are smarter and that they also are met with the right metrics so that they understand that they're actually meeting the need of the audiences that they're paying for.
There's so much good nuggets that you have in there, what you just said. I think this idea of, you could call it targeting, but it's really hyper-personalization. And you said something key when you talk about, okay, Black Americans, but how they break down. That hyper-personalization to understand that these audiences are not monoliths.
Correct.
And you can't sort of paint with one brush, right? Is a really important part of how we are trying to say to brands and create spaces for brands, that allow for brands to connect in a really inclusive way with different parts of the culture, because we see the increase in ROI.
That's right.
And that's ultimately what drives this. help me understand, as you mentioned Ford, and by the way, we are excited for Ford as a partner. They were a partner in the year one with what was 365 Black Excellence. The performance was really strong. Now we have excellence, and we're excited for a year two partnership with Ford, and thank you for that. When you share this with brands, Ford and others, how do they respond? What is the because this doesn't exist, and I'm surprised by the number of conversations I have in the marketplace where I'll share an insight and it's mind-blowing to the brand. And I'm like, this is not that mind-blowing. There's like even deeper data than this. So when you share the statistics that comes out of Culture Lab, how are you then taking the next steps with the brand to help them to say, translate it from an insight to an action?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, the data is totally infused in the strategy, right? So the strategic department, the data scientists, the data analysts come in and really talk to the brands specifically around, hey, here's the problem you said you wanted to solve. And if that is the problem you'd like to solve, here are the things that we think are in the marketplace to bring that to bear for you. A lot of times there is a kind of a, ooh, I didn't know that, right? Well, probably because your other agency weren't tasked to tell you that, right? Like at the end of the day, part of the reason that you have affinity agencies or agencies that do specific things for you, whether it be music or youth, race and ethnicity are no different. We're really, really good at going deep in the audiences that we serve. Your general market audience is really primarily an upper funnel audience, right? We're talking about capturing, just the eyes and the ears, right? We want to be recognized. But if you want somebody to do something, you better get a hell of a lot more personal than hi, right? Or heaven forbid you keep introducing yourself, right? You want to start to build a relationship. You want to start to let people know that they matter.
Right.
And the only way to do that is to not only meet someone, but then to introduce new things to build that relationship. And we know that our data goes deep enough to get you to that level to actually get a conversion.
Yeah. You talk about new things, and I do want to come to that. But here's always a question I have. Longest standing agency, multicultural agency. What's been the same? Because we're obsessed with new and next and trends. But there are probably some things that are tried and true that are the same that marketers still aren't fully maximizing and understanding. But what's your POV on what are some of the things?
We love the shiny new toy, don't we? I mean, listen, I love pretty new things. I love the fast new whatever. It's all super cool. The wheel's still round.
The wheel is still around.
We put new rims on it, right? Sometimes the rims spin, sometimes they're shiny, sometimes they're matted, but I haven't found a new way to roll anywhere without a wheel.
Yeah.
And marketing is still marketing, right? It's still about how do we get a message across and ask someone to do something. That's the same. We just have a whole bunch of new pipes to put them through and new ways to experience it. And we should use that, right? Those tools are now more specific, right? They are more applicable, right? Where we used to just say, oh, we got TV, we got radio, we got print. I'm dating myself, that's where we started, right? But now we've got audio. Everything's digital, right? Your phone, you can now project wherever you like. At a point, that was just a thought, right? Like it was a dream. But now that's no longer a dream, but we still have to get down to the fundamentals of marketing, and that has not changed, not one bit.
And to your point about fundamentals, right, the 4 Ps, you have to resonate with the consumer, right? That P for placement is about, I'll never forget this, but they said the placement is not where it sits in the store. The placement is where you place it in the mindset of the consumer.
That's right.
That's what that P really means. And so, you said earlier on, we need 10 more excellences because there's not enough spaces. Can you touch a little bit, let's switch gears from distribution to content. What is your perspective on the current landscape as it relates to content that's exclusive, that speaks to these different dimensions of the consumer, right? And again, coming back to your words, where's the content for the Black American that's from an African background versus America versus the Caribbean? Is there enough of it? do marketers need to go that deep? Like, how do you all think about it?
I mean, we think about it with respect to what are you making, who are you making this for? Right? If it's a product or a thing, especially if it's personal, you kind of need to know who I am. Right? I think it would be really important for you to know that I'm a Black mom of 2. You know, I've got 2 boys, well, really 3 with my husband, but I mean, you know, I've got dudes in my house. I live in the suburbs. I, you know, drive a pretty big truck. But if you put me into most databases, I show up as a white female. So you know what you're sending me? Suave. You know what that's not going to do? My hair. Not at all. Right? So you're going to have to double click and see some other things that I do, right? Or pay attention to how I move a little differently. I don't, you know, use, you know, certain types of things that are going to be drying, right? I need moisture. So that's going to be really important if you're going to just send me a sample or you're going to try and woo me. You should know other things. So the data, again, really, really important.
And the deprecation, to your point, there's cookie deprecation happening, there's AI happening, but AI is only as unbiased as the people who are, the inputs that are going in there. Is that where content becomes so much more important? Because when you need that double click to figure out who you are, what you watch and what you consume is an incredible signal against that. So how do you all think about when you're, again, working with brands, guiding them on where they need to show up and the purpose of having inclusive content as part of that strategy?
You're leaving money on the table, right? It's just a fundamental, if I tell you that you have a growth opportunity of 10 to 20% if you focus on this beautiful young woman, you should listen to me. I mean, why would you leave money on the table? Why would you not expand your opportunities? And that's what this is about, expanding your opportunities, not negating, right? We often in this, you know, we're very competitive, right? We want all the things, but no one's good at all the things, right? So at the end of the day, what are you going to focus on and be really, really good at? Because with that comes loyalty. With that comes all the other wonderful benefits of a popular and successful brand, right? That has longevity. You are meeting the needs of your consumer. You are evolving with that consumer. And with the browning of the globe, things will have to fundamentally change. There's nothing wrong with that, but things will have to fundamentally change because the people that are using it will fundamentally be different.
And that's a great point. I think the U.S. Census Bureau said 100%. 100% of the growth in the U.S. Not 99, not 98, 100% of the growth in the United States are coming from BIPOC people. So marketers, you know, if we look at the statistics, the dollars aren't yet following the growth that we're seeing. What strategies are you implementing as UWG to help brands see this and understand that, like, as you said, you're leaving money on the table? How do you help them get over that hump? Because they're clearly, I mean, if you look at the numbers, something is not connecting.
I think it goes back to that education point yet again. One of the things that we've done over the last 5 years is really expanded globally, right? We went up to Canada and started working with an agency called Monsoon. So we have UWG Monsoon, and that focuses on what we call newcomers. Canada is bringing in 700,000 AAPI immigrants every year for the next 10 years because of their declining population. Well, you know what everyone needs to know in Canada? How do I deal with 700,000 new people that come from a totally different culture? How do I deal with that, right? So we have clients up there like TD Bank, they need to bank, right? How do you bank? How do you now take what they did at home, bring them into a new system, hopefully through something familiar that allows them to feel comfortable and trust you as a bank, right? So we are talking about that. And when we went into Africa, very similarly, trying to really understand, listen, there's a lot of movement happening in the world. And that is affecting the US and everywhere else at the same time. So you've got huge African populations coming in, Afro-Brazilian populations coming in. So we really do try to dimensionalize for our clients. It's a bigger It's a bigger piece, right? We can look at the diaspora, and any brand that would leave 100 million opportunities on the table, I welcome you to just go out of business.
Yeah.
Like, that's just ridiculous.
And that's what, for me, I think this is going to be a self-correct, the market kind of corrects itself in some ways, right? And there will be laggers and there will be leaders. When you look at the clients in your portfolio who are leading, who are listening to you and take less convincing, what are they doing? What are some of the things that they're doing versus the ones that require just a little bit more time and tests and the case studies? And I always say everyone wants to see a case study, no one wants to do a case study, right? You know, that's another problem to solve.
I mean, those clients are really talking about sustainability, right? And long-term growth, continuous improvement, incremental improvement, not this sweeping change. Very few times have I seen something that's just an overnight. You know, if we look at, you know, what is 2%, what is 5%, what is 10% more year over year, that's a win, right? And that's sustainable. Everything that goes up must come down, right? What we don't have to do is crash, right? We can come down a little bit, we can, you know, we can meander a bit, but again, to get back to that old adage, right? The cash cow versus the star versus the, you know, you gotta invest something in all of your areas to be able to sustain over time. And one thing I can say, you know, being at the board level, that's one of the things that I'm so proud and happy to have learned is that you gotta look long-term, you have to maybe act short-term, but be prepared to live through the medium term, right? None of this is overnight. It will catch up. I will give a prediction. It's gonna be a tough 15, 20 years though, because it's gonna be a bit of a tussle. Nobody wants to give up power. No one wants to give up, you know, being first. But I think it is gonna be about who's the best at being inclusive and bringing more people under the tent to be able to expand and grow your brands over time.
That's such a good point about no one wants to give up being first, because I do think that brands are seeing they're losing at a fast rate. They are acting on it on the acquisition side. You see a lot of brands saying, "Oh, I'm losing market share. I'm going to buy this company that I'm losing market share." But on the distribution side, we're still not yet seeing some of the same type of behaviors. Do you think it's important as part of their strategy? Because, you know, reach is available everywhere. If to your point, if Suave wants to reach you or I, even though, well, I don't need it anymore.
Sure.
You know, they can. Yes, I might be watching something on Peacock. I might be watching General Market, but I don't sit and lean into it the way I sit and lean into things that are curated for me. As UWG are going in and giving guidance, where does distribution and resonant distribution play a role relative to general market planning, which really has been I mean, let's be honest, agencies have spent the last 15 years convincing brands, you can reach everyone with one ad, two ads, and they'll come along in just these big spaces. And now that's hitting a point of diminishing returns.
Well, I think that's still the fight in linear, right? From a distribution standpoint, I think linear, you know, I think we have lost that war. I mean, the upfront war on linear, we kind of, sorry, we just can't play here. The other part is our people really aren't there.
Right.
So it's a hard fight,
Yeah.
right? It's a hard fight to win because we're not there. We are so prolific in all these other places. Our money is actually better spent being much more nuanced and thoughtful about where we put our dollars, why we put them there, and hopefully we can build this ecosystem of feeding it to grow it. Because just going back, we have more, I think, monetary opportunities that cannot be fulfilled because you would just take over a channel, right? Like I was watching, I forgot what I was watching. Oh, Expanse on Prime.
Yeah.
Somehow they thought me and my husband liked to gamble because I kept getting the gambling commercial like every time. And I'm like, this is so odd. So clearly whoever, I don't know if it was DraftKings or whoever just bought the whole series.
Yeah.
But it was awful. Because they had no idea we don't gamble at all. Actually, we go to Vegas and stay in the hotel without the casino.
Or it's, you know, the real talk is someone made a media buy, they have a certain impressions to hit, they don't have the scale to get it, and so that frequency cap goes up, 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 And the reality is
sucked.
we're not checking it. And there's definitely waste in the system, and that's why the ROI is so much more improved when you can buy and you look at sort of diverse owned distribution, because that is where the scale is and the resonance, and you don't need to hit someone 50 times with the same ad. And
it was awful.
And after a while, it becomes a turnoff, right? So even if it was a brand you were interested in, after I see you 5 times, I'm like, stop.
Oh, I was like, this is insane.
Yeah, this is
like
crazy.
if anybody else is watching this is awful.
And that touches on measurement. So you talked about incremental 3 or 5% growth. What's the metrics that when you talk to brands and you sit with your brand partners, what are the metrics that they're looking at, and has that evolved over time in terms of how they determine what is successful?
I mean, listen, the bottom line metric is, did you move whatever this thing is?
Yeah.
Now, that's great if we are all the way through the funnel. Right? But there are some gating factors that maybe you are, hitting consideration, but you never get past that particular metric. There are different ones now because of digital and in different types of engagement and different ways for you to kind of complete, the journey. But in general, no, I would say, they're pretty similar, right? Like, how do we get people into this consideration set? It may be in multiple places now, right? Where it used to kind of land in some customer service or something along those lines. We have many places to aggregate where that consideration may be happening. And then how do we talk about what conversion looks like? Retail strategy has just, exploded because of that. So I think there are these little nuances, but at the end of the day, how much are we putting in versus how much are we getting out is still the metric that most people are looking at. Now, whether or not you're in charge of that is very different, right? You can influence, but if you're not in charge of the last 3 feet of a process, then you've got to be very, discerning as to, well, what part of this am I really affecting versus how can I really take this all the way through the journey?
And when you bring it back to streaming, because again, we see that our audience is going more and more into streaming, and so this is a place we have to be and make sure that we are bringing resonance. Is streaming looked at as a full funnel approach, or where do you see brands leaning? Because I hear from brands all the time, streaming is very effective. I'm like, how is it effective? Please tell me. And depending on the brand and the category, you get a slightly different answer. Using Ford as an example, just because we brought it up, and how much more time they need to spend there. Where does UniWorld see streaming in terms of the purchasing funnel?
I mean, we think it's really impactful. One of the things that's amazing about it's on demand, right? If we know where the person is, what state of mind they're in, we can serve them with the right information and the right ad. That doesn't have to be annoying. And I think we can do that really effectively. The fact of the matter is the content matters, right? It's key. It's a trust and verify. I may see something in Glamour, but I'm gonna go double check on Essence, right? Did they say I could do that too, right? Like, that is real. And we should not discount the trust and verify model of it all.
That's amazing. That's a good point about sort of where you check and you see it one place, but it resonates different in another place. And that's the goal, right? Like, how do we build resonance with what we're doing with excellence with NBC as a partner? Coming back a little bit to data, where does when you look at the data that's coming out of Culture Labs, where is it pointing to as it relates to where the audience is spending its most time? Because I think that's the question we also hear. And we have data around streaming, but I know it's in other places too. I don't know if you have this, but like, if you think about the top places where we are spending time from a media consumption, what does that look like, and how has that been changing? Because as your point early on is, there's so much more places now.
I mean, the phone is the number one. I mean, just number one. They are a long bit. There used to be a time when people would say, I'm not gonna watch a movie on my phone. Not true, right? I see people in the beauty salon. I see people everywhere. They are watching long form, short form, and everything in between. So for us, it is a matter of getting more engagement at that level. We have still, I believe, been limited to doing a lot more of the traditional engagement rather than really being much more dynamic and much more personal at that level.
And on the personal side, do you think For brands, are brands thinking about that in the sense of there's one thing to buy the 30 and the 60, and it's great when there's on demand. Where does branded content fit into that model? Are your brands saying, hey, if we really need to be number one or maintain number one, we have to invest beyond a 30-second or a 60-second spot. We have to invest in content that tells our story but resonates with this audience. Is that part of the ecosystem here? Or?
I think it's swinging back.
Okay.
I think there was a moment when folks kind of said, oh, product placement, right? Like they were like, I don't know about that.
Right.
But really to come back and really dimensionalize the fact that it's more than product placement.
Yeah.
It's really about building a story, right? So working with creators, how do we build this as a part of the ecosystem? How does the car or the product of hair care or we have the National Pork Board, right? Like the food is a story, right? How do we make that something that's appealing in a way that doesn't feel so heavy-handed and most certainly doesn't necessarily lock us into a 30, a 60, a 45.
Yeah. And you look at, Bonin talks about, I don't know if he's here, but he talks about this all the time. You look at the Barbie movie, you look at the Lego movie, you look at what's happening now with Hasbro and Transformers.
Sonic.
This feels like, is this a shift? Is this the new way? Because, I mean, to your point about ROI and did it move the needle, all of those moved the needle significantly.
It's the new old way.
It's the new old
way.
Right?
I Love Lucy. She was the queen of product placement, right? And building the story. The Vita Vita regimen, which is my favorite. I love it. But I mean, that was a real product, right? And everyone really consumes. We're swinging, the wheel's still round.
Right.
So I think whenever we exhaust one thing, you move back into another. And now, again, it's just more places that we can put it. I see really dynamic content. I'm, seeing all of the, content that now through your phone, things show up. I'm playing with all the AI tools and looking at all the really interesting ways that we can now talk about product placement that may or may not have been as accessible, right? Yeah. You remember the days of the music video, give me $100,000. Like, what? We're not doing that anymore, but we can do something fun, right? We can do something close, and I think it's just made it a lot easier to come back into that branded integration and entertainment space.
You said the word of the year, so even though we're not talking about that, I have to ask you, what's your thoughts on AI and how AI impacts this space?
I think it's a tool. I'll tell you this, when the robots walk into the store, buy the Louis bag, pay with their own money from their bank account, then I'm tapping out, right? Because then we're gone, right? Yeah. You don't need us anymore. Yeah. But right now, the bot is just that. Yeah. And I would put it in your toolkit. I'd play with it. I'd figure out how we can make it more inclusive, right? There's so many things that can be done. It's just another technology tool. And we should put it in its place. I think we're overblowing the lack of understanding that whenever we bring out a new technology, we need more humans to monitor it. So this is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and we need to be really thoughtful about, at some point, a human has to buy it. So I don't care what the Google or any of them say, if it doesn't connect with a real person, who cares? It still could be wrong, just fast. Fast and wrong.
I heard someone say that, I don't know, I saw it was like, oh, it's not the AI that's going to take your job, it's the human that knows AI that's going to take your job.
And there you have it. There you have it, beautifully said.
Awesome. Well, last question, and then we will close that because I know we're almost at time here. If you were to give a prediction, when you think about multicultural marketing, you think about the platforms, streaming and otherwise, what's your prediction of how the space will evolve in the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years?
Everything will be multicultural. Everything. There is no way to avoid it. 100% of the growth in the U.S. is coming from BIPOC communities. I don't know another way to say it. Everything will become multicultural, which means you need to get good at whatever you do, and you really need to understand how to manage difference, right? The game is going to be telling clients why this particular community is important, right? We sit on a crutch of race and ethnicity. We're so much deeper than that. We're so much better than that. And we will lean into that. And I think the agencies, the streaming platforms, the partners that understand that that's the win, I think it's going to be game over. It'll be rough,
Yeah.
but I think everyone's going to have to become very multicultural.
Monique, always a pleasure. You dropped so many gems. Thank you so much.
You're awesome.
My favorite is the wheel is still round, and good luck going out of business. Because I think you're right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, they got to get us out of here.
Yeah, we can't move.